It was the kind of scene that made television history. A dimly lit room, the flicker of candlelight across bare skin, and two actors surrendering to passion with a raw intensity that felt almost too real. When Sam Heughan and Caitríona Balfe first delivered one of Outlander's notorious intimate scenes, the world stopped breathing. Social media erupted with GIFs, fan art, and hashtags. Critics praised their chemistry as once in a generation. Overnight, they weren't just co-stars, they were christened Hollywood's most convincing couple. But what millions of viewers celebrated as romance on screen carried a hidden cost off-screen. Because while fans melted over Jamie and Claire's love story, Caitríona Balfe was living another reality. She was married. Her husband, Tony McGill, was suddenly forced into the strangest of roles. A man sharing his wife, not with another lover, but with the global fantasy of a fictional marriage that felt all too convincing. The fandom blurred lines recklessly. From the first season, viewers insisted that Sam and Caitríona must be in love in real life. Their stolen glances in interviews, their laughter on red carpets, even casual touches became evidence in elaborate fan theories. Vlogs popped up daily, speculating on secret romances, hidden engagements, even pregnancies that never existed. And through it all, Tony McGill was nearly invisible, a ghost in the narrative of his own marriage. For years, Tony kept silent. A private man, he rarely appeared in the spotlight, attending events with Caitríona but staying in the background. To some fans, his absence was confirmation of what they wanted to believe, that Caitríona and Sam were destined for each other. Every wedding photo she posted, every public acknowledgement of her husband's existence, was dismissed as a cover-up. And in that erasure, Tony's role as Caitríona's real partner became almost unbearable. Because while the world consumed Jamie and Claire's romance as entertainment, for Tony, those scenes were a test of loyalty and resilience. Imagine watching your wife's body entwined with another man's week after week, broadcast to millions, dissected by strangers frame by frame. Critics raved about the authenticity, fans cried over the love story, but Tony was left asking himself, what happens when acting is so convincing it begins to erode the very foundation of your home? Friends close to the couple hinted at tension. Caitríona, fiercely professional, defended her craft as art. For her, the intimacy was part of the job, a necessary component of telling Claire Fraser's story. But for Tony, the job wasn't confined to the set. It followed them everywhere. Into their living room when episodes aired, into their bedroom when tabloids printed speculative headlines, into their family gatherings when relatives whispered awkward questions. The strain grew sharper as the fandom's obsession intensified. At conventions, fans screamed for Sam and Caitríona to kiss, to hold hands, to act like a couple even when the cameras weren't rolling. Interviewers, eager for clicks, asked intrusive questions about whether their on-screen passion spilled into real life. And every time Caitríona and Sam laughed it off, Tony sat in the shadows, his discomfort invisible but undeniable. The cracks in the marriage weren't about jealousy alone, they were about identity. Tony had married Caitríona, the woman, not Claire Fraser, the heroine of a global love story. Yet everywhere they went, he was forced to compete with a fictional husband, one played, all too convincingly, by Sam Heughan. Fans didn't see Tony as the real partner. They saw him as the obstacle standing in the way of their fantasy. And over time, that perception seeped into the couple's private life like poison. By the time Outlander reached its later seasons, the tension had become impossible to ignore. Insiders whispered that Tony often avoided premieres, unwilling to endure yet another night of cameras flashing as his wife kissed and clung to another man on screen. The fandom's cheers felt like daggers. Tabloids speculated about marital unhappiness, and while Caitríona dismissed the rumors, the unease in her husband's eyes told a different story. Finally, the breaking point arrived. Tony McGill, long silent, began confiding in friends that the relentless cycle of intimate scenes and fan obsession had left their family fractured. He admitted that while he supported Caitríona's career, he could no longer pretend that the endless parade of love scenes with Sam hadn't taken a toll on their marriage. In private, he spoke of feeling sidelined, of living in a marriage where he was constantly compared to a fictional man who wasn't even real, yet somehow felt more present in his wife's life than he was. And then came the whispers. Tony was ready to speak publicly. For the first time, the quiet husband in Caitríona's shadow was preparing to break his silence, to reveal what life had really been like living behind the facade of Hollywood's most convincing love story. Fans who had worshipped Sam and Caitríona's chemistry were about to hear a truth that could shatter the dream forever. Because while Jamie and Claire's love story played out as perfection on screen, off-screen, Tony McGill was preparing to expose the painful reality that those very scenes were tearing his family apart. For years, Tony McGill endured in silence. He watched his wife rise to international fame, watched her name entwined endlessly with Sam Heughan's, and watched their marriage dismissed as background noise to a story fans insisted was bigger, juicier, and more romantic. But silence has its limits. And finally, Tony reached his breaking point. It didn't come through a tabloid leak or anonymous source, it came straight from Tony himself. In a rare, candid moment during a private industry gathering, his words spilled out, carried like wildfire by those who overheard them. And when the comments reached the public, they detonated across social media. "I love my wife," Tony reportedly said, "but sometimes I feel like I'm competing with a ghost. Those scenes with Sam, they aren't just fiction anymore. They follow us home, they follow us everywhere, and it's made this family very, very unhappy." The confession hit like a thunderclap. For years, fans had speculated about Tony's feelings, often dismissing him as jealous or irrelevant. But now, his voice was undeniable. The man who had stood quietly at Caitríona's side through premieres and ceremonies had finally confirmed what many suspected. The steamy scenes between Sam and Caitríona weren't harmless entertainment inside their marriage. They were wounds that never healed. The fallout was immediate. Fans who once celebrated Outlander's intimacy now found themselves torn. Some rushed to defend Caitríona, insisting her work was art and Tony needed to understand that. Others sided with Tony, arguing that no spouse could be expected to endure years of watching their partner simulate such raw passion with another man. Social media divided into camps, and every argument grew louder, nastier, more personal. But what made Tony's words so devastating wasn't jealousy alone. It was the image of a marriage buckling under the weight of Hollywood fantasy. He described late nights when episodes aired and the world gushed over Caitríona and Sam's chemistry while he sat in silence, feeling erased. He admitted that friends and family whispered cruel questions. "How do you stand it? Doesn't it bother you?" The truth was, it did. And over time, the whispers poisoned not only his own peace of mind, but the harmony of their household. And then came the sentence that broke the fandom's heart. "Sometimes, it feels like I married Caitríona, but the world married her to Sam. And I'm the stranger in my own story." The raw honesty painted Tony not as a jealous man, but as a husband drowning under circumstances no one could prepare for. Fans wept reading those words. Some admitted they had never considered the toll their obsession had taken. Others lashed out, angry that the illusion of Jamie and Claire's perfect love was now forever tainted by reality. For Sam Heughan, the revelation was a nightmare. Though he had never crossed any boundaries off-screen, Tony's words cast him in an unflattering spotlight. Suddenly, Sam was portrayed as the intruder in Caitríona's marriage, not by his own choice, but by the sheer power of his on-screen chemistry. Headlines screamed, "Tony McGill calls out Sam and Caitríona's intimate scenes." Paparazzi hounded Sam for a reaction, shouting questions at airports and red carpets. His silence, once charming, now seemed damning. The industry, too, began to debate. Was it fair to demand such explicit performances from actors who were married? Did the obsession with hyper-realistic intimacy cross an ethical line? Producers defended the show as groundbreaking art. Critics countered that art should not come at the cost of personal destruction. And in the middle of it all, Tony's voice echoed louder than any critic's review. A man begging for his marriage to be seen, not overshadowed. Caitríona herself faced an impossible position. As a professional, she had always insisted her intimate scenes were about storytelling, not reality. But as a wife, she now faced the undeniable truth of Tony's pain. Her silence in the aftermath spoke volumes. Not denial, not agreement, just the heavy weight of a woman caught between career and family. The revelation left fans questioning everything. Was Outlander's iconic passion worth the sacrifice of real happiness? Could Caitríona balance the love story she portrayed with the love story she lived? And most chillingly, had the dream romance of Jamie and Claire destroyed the real romance of Caitríona and Tony? In the end, Tony's words weren't just about jealousy or discomfort. They were about the destructive power of blurred lines, when fiction is consumed as truth, and when actors are stripped of their humanity in service of fantasy. And so the fandom that once cried tears of joy over Jamie and Claire now cried very different tears, mourning the reality that behind the greatest love story on television lay a family unraveling. Because sometimes, the hottest scenes on screen leave the coldest silence at home.